New York City, once hailed as the beating heart of the American dream, was never meant to be a place for only the wealthy. It was the city of dockworkers, artists, immigrants, strivers, and dreamers who came with nothing but left with something. But as the years passed, the very soul of New York began to change. What was once a city for everyone slowly turned into a city for a privileged few. And behind this transformation lies a story rarely told in full: the deals struck in shadowed boardrooms, the soaring towers that erased entire neighborhoods, and the quiet resignation of ordinary New Yorkers forced to leave behind the city they once called home. The story begins in the 1970s, when New York was on its knees. Crime was rampant, the city was broke, and whole blocks of the Bronx were burning. Wall Street was not yet the financial powerhouse it would become, and many wondered if New York would survive at all. But where most saw decay, others saw opportunity. Developers, bankers, and politicians began to stitch together a plan, not just to save New York, but to reinvent it. The city needed money, and money meant deals. Landlords who once abandoned buildings suddenly realized those same properties could be goldmines if the right incentives were put in place. The city began offering tax breaks to developers willing to build, sparking the early seeds of gentrification. But for every glass tower that went up, another family was pushed out. Anthony Scaramucci, a son of Long Island and a man who had seen both the grit of the streets and the glamour of Wall Street, often spoke of how the city seemed to split into two different worlds. In one world, young professionals sipped wine on rooftop bars overlooking Central Park. In the other, working-class families struggled to keep up with rising rents in Queens and Brooklyn. Jonathan Mahler, a journalist who covered the city's transformation, captured the emotional weight of these changes. He described the quiet heartbreak of lifelong New Yorkers, bus drivers, teachers, grocers, watching their neighborhoods vanish beneath waves of investment money and luxury condos. The turning point came in the 1980s and 90s. Wall Street's boom spilled into every corner of the city. Suddenly, the financial industry was the engine of New York's revival, and the city embraced it. Mayors promised jobs, prosperity, and safer streets, and to a large extent, they delivered. Crime fell, Times Square was cleaned up, and the city's image as a lawless jungle gave way to a polished metropolis. But there was a cost. The neighborhoods that once gave New York its unique soul, the bodegas, jazz clubs, and immigrant-owned restaurants, were priced out. Landlords realized they could make more money catering to the wealthy, and entire blocks shifted overnight. Scaramucci and Mahler would often debate whether this transformation was inevitable. Was it the natural evolution of a great city, or was it engineered by those who stood to profit the most? Mahler pointed to the policies that favored luxury development over affordable housing, the tax incentives that benefited billionaires, and the way campaign donations influenced zoning decisions. Scaramucci, ever the Wall Street insider, admitted the truth was uncomfortable. Yes, the city grew richer, but it also grew colder. It stopped being a city that lifted people up, and instead became one where only those already standing on high ground could survive. The human stories reveal the real toll. Take Rosa, a Puerto Rican grandmother who had lived in the Lower East Side since the 1960s. She watched as her neighbors moved away one by one, unable to keep up with rent. The local bakery where she bought bread closed, replaced by a boutique. The corner deli turned into a high-end cafe, selling lattes for prices she couldn't believe. When her building was sold to a developer, Rosa had no choice but to leave the only home she had ever known. Her story wasn't unique. It was repeated thousands of times in Harlem, Brooklyn, Queens, and beyond. Meanwhile, hedge fund managers, celebrities, and tech moguls snapped up penthouses with views of the skyline. Glass towers rose on 57th Street, nicknamed Billionaires' Row. Apartments sat empty, not as homes but as investments, safe boxes in the sky for the world's wealthiest. The very idea of community began to fray. New York was still alive, still buzzing with energy, but the energy was different. It was transactional, driven not by shared struggle but by capital. Yet even amidst the tide of wealth, voices of resistance emerged. Activists demanded affordable housing, tenants fought back against unfair evictions, and some politicians dared to challenge the developers. These battles were rarely easy, and victories were often small, but they carried a powerful message. The city still belonged to its people, if only they were willing to fight for it. Mahler often wrote about these moments, capturing the resilience of New Yorkers who refused to let the city's soul be sold entirely to the highest bidder. By the 2000s and 2010s, the transformation was complete. New York was now the financial and cultural capital of the world, but also one of the most unequal cities on earth. The divide between rich and poor had never been sharper. Luxury towers stood blocks away from public housing, their residents living in different universes. And yet, the working class still kept the city alive: the subway operators, the waiters, the teachers, the nurses. They were the heartbeat of New York, even as the city seemed to forget them. Anthony Scaramucci, reflecting on his own journey, admitted he was torn. He had benefited from the very system that priced others out, yet he couldn't ignore the emptiness of a city without its diversity, without its grit. Jonathan Mahler, with a journalist's eye, warned that New York's story was a cautionary tale for other cities across America. When money becomes the only measure of success, community is the first casualty. And so, the untold story of how New York became a city for the rich is not just about skyscrapers and stock markets. It is about people. Those who stayed, those who left, and those who fought to remain. It is about a dream reshaped, sometimes shattered, sometimes rebuilt. The final message is simple but powerful: a city is not just steel and glass. It is not just capital and profit. A city is its people. And if New York is to remain the greatest city in the world, it cannot belong only to the rich, it must belong to everyone. Because in the end, the soul of New York has never been for sale.